Good evening, everybody. I am Assemblymember Laura Friedman, and I would like to thank all of you for joining us here this evening. We have a great panel of experts for you tonight, ready to answer questions that you might have. And the agenda tonight is for us to discuss wildfire preparedness and resiliency and how all of us can prepare for wildfire season, which now runs not just for a few months, but really all year round. So those of us who live in brushland, those of us who live really anywhere in Southern California need to be prepared for the eventual wildfires. And also to make sure that we're as resilient as we can be and as fire ready as we can be. And before we get to our panel, our great panelists, I wanted to just give you a very brief legislative update because we are right now in bill signing season with the governor having signed several of my bills this week. And I just wanted to give you guys a little heads up. Just this week, 4 of my bills were signed, one just today. The bill that was signed today is AB 1933 that gives developers more of a path to creating affordable housing that's for sale for low income and first time home buyers. So we're very excited about that. Habitat for Humanity and Heritage Housing Partners were some of our sponsors of that bill. And I hope to be able to use it to bring more affordable for sale ownership housing into our district. AB 1909 was signed this week, which is our bicycle omnibus bill. We call it our omnibike bill, which makes a number of improvements to the traffic code to make it safer for cyclists. AB 2097 was passed, which prohibits public agencies from enforcing parking minimums on developments within a half mile of a major transit stop. There's been a lot of press and media interest in that particular bill. So if you're interested, there's a lot of material out there on it. And lastly, AB 1938, which ensures that cities can maintain their existing authority, which I was able to pass into law 2 years ago, to lower and cap speed limits based on safety and engineering data. Now, in terms of wildfire work, which is the topic of tonight's town hall, I wanted to just mention a few bills that I've passed in the past few years relating to this topic. This is something of wide interest to my constituents, something that I've done a lot of work on myself, particularly as chair of the Natural Resources Committee. AB 2149, which was signed into law a couple of years ago, makes it easy, and I was a co-author of this bill, makes it easier for former inmate firefighters to become professional firefighters. These are people who, while they were inmates, fought some of our biggest and most dangerous fires in California, and this gives them a path to put that knowledge that they have and that experience to good use to become professional firefighters in California. AB 3074 protects Californians living in high fire areas by modernizing defensible space protections through the creation of a third defensible space zone called an Ember Resistance zone. And this is basically within 0 and 5 feet of your house to make sure that that zone is particularly ember resistant. Means take that bougainvillea off the walls, make sure you don't have wood cladding if you live in a high fire severity zone, that your grates are covered, that kind of thing. AB 2911 updates previous fire safety legislation to respond to the severity of our current wildfire threat, which is increasing, including by strengthening building standards for fire resistance, creating a list of low-cost retrofits for existing homes to make them more fire safe. And it also identifies areas that are in high fire zones because those areas have changed over the last several years to make sure we all know the risk that we face. And lastly, AB 3098 requires residential care facilities for the elderly and disabled populations to have detailed disaster plans and evacuation plans, along with annual training for all of their staff to make sure that our most vulnerable residents don't get left behind in case of a wildfire. Now, we all have probably noticed that wildfires are increasing both in the number that we're having and in severity. This is something that should be of great concern to all of us. Every year, this decade has been worse than the last. Every year in this decade, every year is setting records for being the worst fire season on record. And wildfire destruction is at an all-time high in our state. Now, our panelists that we've brought you tonight are experts in terms of preparing for and responding to wildfire disasters, and they're here to generously share their expertise and their time with us. Our goal is that all of us leaves this town hall feeling that we have action steps that we can all do to prepare ourselves and our property from wildfires, as well as from the impacts of the air quality impacts that we see, the bad air. Now I'd like to pass this town hall on to our panelists to introduce themselves to you. I'm going to list them and let them all introduce themselves as they see fit. We have Armine Sarkissian, who's the outreach analyst for the California Department of Insurance, Fire Chief Timothy Erst from the Glendale Fire Department, Fire Marshal Foster McLean from the Glendale Fire Department, Fire Captain and Emergency Manager John Payne from the Glendale Fire Department, Chief Bigelow from CAL FIRE, Cheryl Jones, who's the Senior Emergency Service Coordinator from Cal OCS, that's the California Department of Emergency Operations and Services, and Assistant Chief Dave Stone from Cal OES. So I think you'll agree that this is an incredibly knowledgeable panel that we're lucky to have. And with that, I'd like our panelists, if you like, to maybe tell a little bit more about what your area is just briefly, and then we'll get to questions. Why don't we start with Armine?
Absolutely. Good evening, Assemblymember Friedman and everyone that has tuned in tonight. Thank you so much for including the Department of Insurance on this very important town hall tonight to discuss how to prepare yourself when it comes to a wildfire emergency. So I'm very excited to be on this panel and look forward to having a very fruitful discussion tonight.
Chief Erst, welcome you. This might be your first panel as Glendale Fire Chief, and we're really happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's my first Zoom call in this position. Maybe not my first on the other side, but Assemblymember Friedman, I want to thank you for including us, and more so for your support of the fire service for these many years. And as the Assemblymember briefly mentioned, this is just my second week in my new career. I actually failed at retirement. I managed to retire for 36 hours. I just completed about 35 and a half years with another major city just to our south. And I'm just thrilled to death to be part of the Glendale Fire family and to continue in my service and my support of what the men and women of the fire service do. Rather than take a lot of your time, I just want to make two brief introductions because these are really the subject matter experts for the Glendale Fire Department that will be answering the majority of our questions from our perspective. And that's Fire Marshal Foster McLean, who supervises our Fire Prevention Bureau. Foster, just wave so that we know it's you.
Thank you, sir.
And then Captain John Payne, who's the emergency manager for the city of Glendale. And both of those, I think you'll find they'll provide some really pertinent and expert advice and answers to some of your questions. And we've had a little side conversation with Chief Bigelow, and I'm sure we'll just sort of work together, the three or four of us, to come up with answers to everything you might have for us. Thank you very much, everybody. Looking forward to being a part of it.
Thanks to all of you, and welcome again. We're thrilled to have you here. Chief Bigelow.
Great, thank you, and welcome everybody tonight. Appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you in this about this very important topic of wildfire preparedness. So my name is Frank Bigelow. I'm a staff chief with CAL FIRE. I work out of the office of the state fire marshal. I've been with CAL FIRE for just shy of 20 years, and I've spent a majority of my career in this realm of preparedness, whether it be defensible space or home hardening, but really focused on land use planning and every aspect of prevention of wildfire, going out and speaking to many groups like this one. So I look forward to an engaging conversation today, and we have a lot of topics to cover. So I'll pass it on to the next person so we can get started.
Great. Why don't we go to Cheryl Jones?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Cheryl Jones, and I'm the Senior Emergency Services Coordinator for the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, Southern Region. I am currently assigned to Los Angeles County. I've been assigned to Los Angeles County for about 10 years. I work primarily out of their Emergency Operations Center, and I'm the conduit between the county and the state. And I'd like to also introduce our Assistant Chief, Dave Stone, who is our SME on fire. He's Fire Mutual Aid. Dave?
Good evening, everybody. Assemblymember Friedman, appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you and with our constituents and our stakeholders. And my name is Dave Stone. I'm with the Office of Emergency Services, as Cheryl mentioned, Fire and Rescue Division. So I spent 32 years at the LA County Fire Department as assistant chief with them. And I've been with OES for 7 years. My primary responsibility is to manage the mutual aid system in the state of California. My area of responsibility is LA and Orange counties. I also have secondary responsibility with Santa Barbara, Ventura, and San Luis Obispo. So my main role is to be supportive of local government, like Chief Ernst there, and with the state of California CAL FIRE. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. So with that, why don't we go into the questions? The first question, and many of these have come directly from our constituents, and we're also going to ask for people who are watching, if you have questions for our panelists, that you go ahead and ask them through the Q&A Zoom button, or you can email them, and that's also in the chat, that information. So we will be taking, hopefully we'll have time to get to some of those questions as they come in. And if we don't get to them on the Zoom, we will do our best to get you an answer if you email them to us and get that answer back to you. So first of all, people do ask sometimes, how do we just keep wildfires out of our area? How do we keep them away? What's starting them, and how can we stop them from spreading?
So I'll take this one first, Assemblymember Friedman, and really talk about the defensible space portion of it, because that's really what we do here for our vegetation management program in the city of Glendale. We have 2/3 of our city is within the very high fire hazard severity zones. We do a lot of these brush clearance inspections, and what we tell people really is to look at the zone from your home out 100 feet. And we also break those into smaller zones, as you mentioned, the newer zone 0, the 0 to 5 feet. And what you really want to do in that area is take a really good hard look at any combustibles that you have in that area. And whatever you can move out of that 5 feet, do so. That could be things like trellises, firewood, sheds, and things like that. You really want to move those combustibles out and away from that 5-foot zone. And also take a really good approach at what kind of vegetation that you have in that area, and thin and remove as much vegetation that you can. That gets a little bit more tricky because you like the aesthetics and the looks of, excuse me, that vegetation around your home, but it's going to hurt a little bit for these people to really thin that out and take a good look at that vegetation and thin it out as much as you can within that 0 to 5 foot zone 0. The next zone we look at is 5 foot to 30 feet. And there, what we really want to do is what we call the lean, clean, and green zone. So you want to lean, we like to thin out as much of that vegetation as you can. Green, whatever's not alive, if it's dead and dying, we really want to get that removed. And then clean, all that litter that you see on the ground, the pine needles, the bark, and the leaves that are fallen, go ahead and rake those up and get that out from that area. If you're lucky enough to have a yard that goes beyond that 30 feet up to 100 feet, then you're looking at it, you really want to look at how the vegetation and those trees could possibly bring that fire and that the wildfire to your property, and take a hard look. And we don't necessarily want that to be clear cut at all, because we like to have the vegetation, especially if you're on a slope. You do not want to take all the vegetation off the slope, because you're then creating another problem when hopefully we do get some rain. We don't want to see that runoff and those mudslides from into your backyard. So we really just want to look at thinning that vegetation out in that zone. Have that space between your shrubs and between your trees. Make sure that you're just not bringing that wildfire right up to your doorstep. So you want to take a really hard approach at the 0 to 5 feet, and then the 0 to 30 feet, you get a little bit less aggressive, and then the 30 to 100 feet, you just really want to take a really good look at that and make sure that, again, you're removing all that dead and dying material. You don't have that ability to that fire just to kind of walk up to your front door.
Now, I know that there's a lot of good information out there on various websites that give you good examples of this kind of clearance. And we will be posting those later and also putting them on social media so that those of you who are watching will be able to kind of peruse those so that you'll get some specific examples. But I really love the point you made about not removing live plants, out of that zone, because those also act to stop embers from flying. And also about not clearing live plant material too much off of slopes so that you don't have erosion problems. I've seen it just anecdotally in my neighborhood. Sometimes people will come out and take everything off the slope, and then it rains in December and that slope comes down into the street and creates a whole other problem. So we want to have our nature in balance too.
Absolutely. And you did mention that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you did mention the websites, and CAL FIRE has a really good one. I put a plug in for Chief Frank Bigelow, and we borrow so much information from CAL FIRE because they have such great information on their their website that I believe that we'll be taking a look at in a little bit.
That's great. Did anyone want to add anything to that particular question?
Yeah, Assembly Member, if you don't mind,
Sure.
I think another thing that if we have those kind of individuals that are really seeking and wanting more information, I encourage you to seek out either fire safe councils in your local area, resource conservation districts, even your HOA, and become an active participant. Because when we talk about defensible space, we really have to look at ourselves, but we also have to look at this as a community effort. We all need to participate, because there can be, it's just like a chain. When there's one weak link, it can really affect the rest of the links. So it's really important that all of us become engaged, active participants in our local communities as well.
Thank you. So let me ask another question. If you could choose 3 things that people could do immediately, like within the next few weeks, to protect their homes while we have these wildfires across the state, what would those 3 things be?
And I'll kick us off with this question as well. The 3 things that I think are the really most important that anybody can do right now is, again, to take a really good look at that 0 to 5 feet zone 0 space from your home and start moving out some of those easy to move combustibles and take a look at that vegetation. Second thing you can do is just create that lean, clean, and green zone from 0 all the way to 100 feet out from your home. And a third thing that I really didn't touch on yet is to then turn around and take a look at your home. Look at your home, inspect for cracks in your siding. Maybe you got some missing roof tiles. You got some vents that maybe it's missing that mesh behind it. And look for any place that an ember can work its way into your home and start making those repairs and filling up those cracks and roof tiles and that siding on your home.
You know, a firefighter said to me one time when we were talking about defensible space right next to the house and the home hardening, he said, you know, we want to be able to put our back to your home and defend it from the other direction. If we have to defend it from the front and the back, it makes it much, much harder to defend your property. So I think that really stuck with me. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Assemblymember Friedman. You know, a lot of the things you can do to protect your home cost very little, if any money at all. Cleaning those gutters, clearing up trash, removing wood piles, checking the crawl space, any venting. As Foster mentioned, make sure it's about an 1/8 inch metal mesh because many homes catch on fire due to the ember cast or firebrands. So small, all fires start small, and if you can prevent a buildup of leaves, especially in the corners of homes, down at the bottom of the homes, eliminate any wood bark, costs very little, if any money at all, and it can go a long way to protecting your home.
You know, I'm going to go off script because we have a couple of really great questions I'm just going to throw out there. And I think one of them is to Armine. Somebody asked that if you, given this new Ember Resistance zone or any of the defensible space zones, are any insurance claims going to be denied if you didn't have proper defensible space?
Assemblymember, I'm honestly unaware, but I can take this question back to our team and see if we could get a better response.
Okay, that's fine. And somebody else asked about how is there anyone out there who can help a homeowner evaluate their property if they're unsure what they need to do? Who can help them?
So the Department of Insurance actually, and to respond to the previous question as well, we actually have experts that answer your questions and concerns Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's our consumer hotline, and any type of insurance related question can be answered if you call 1-800-927-4357. And these people are really experts. So any type of question they can answer.
But in terms of, you know, if I don't want to alert my insurance company, maybe my house has, you know, not the most hardened home, it's an older home. Is there someone in, let's say in Glendale, that I could call to just come and walk around my property with me and maybe point some things out?
There definitely are licensed contractors that would be able to do that for you. But generally, insurance companies do look for you to do that yourself sometimes. But of course, there are licensed contractors, and you can find those individuals if you go to our website, insurance.ca.gov, for some assistance. But of course, if you call our hotline, somebody will be able to advise you on what steps to take in order to assess your home.
Thank you. Cheryl, I think you have your hand up.
I wanted to answer the question. I don't have three things, but I also wanted to piggyback off of what Captain Bigelow said in the first question, and that's getting to know your homeowners association and the fire safe councils, but also knowing your neighbors. LA City has a wonderful program called Ryland, which is Ready Your LA Neighborhood, and that's going around finding out who your neighbors are and what resources they may have, because during a disaster or an evacuation, or say if you have to shelter in place, you may not have the comfort of being able to call 911, and you may need to depend on your neighbors. So that can be your first line of defense in preparing your home for a fire.
Now, speaking of your neighbors, what resources are there, let's say, for elderly people or disabled people in an evacuation?
The local emergency management agencies, emergency management and emergency operations center can, once they operate their EOCs, they can activate the emergency transportation plan. I know that during Woolsey fire in Malibu and Thousand Oaks area, Access provided a lot of emergency evacuations and transport for persons with disabilities or without transportation.
Thank you. John.
Yeah, to piggyback on to what Cheryl said, evacuations are challenging, and it's something that the Office of Emergency Management in Glendale and throughout the entire LA region takes very, very seriously. It's not an easy decision to make, and it's one that's made in coordination with the incident commanders that are on scene, in cooperation with your local law enforcement, as well as with the Office of Emergency Management. Now, what residents can do if you're immediately threatened, this goes with anybody, whether you have access and functional needs, disabled, elderly, first off is sign up for emergency alerts and warnings to your local jurisdiction. Here in Glendale, we have alert and warning program. In the event of an evacuation, we would use what you might refer to as reverse 911, social media feeds, as well as the gold standard, which is door-to-door knocking, which is happens by our police department. In the end, we would encourage all residents who have any access and functional needs to develop a plan. And if you need help developing a plan, reach out to the Office of Emergency Management in your jurisdiction. In the event of a fast-moving wildfire, we have to get people out of the way. We coordinate with our public works, our local transportation, as well, if need be, personal vehicles to get people out in time of need. Now, if you're elderly and you live in a care home, I would reach out to their management and ask what their plan is as well. And again, you can always coordinate with the Office of Emergency Management if you have any questions.
Thank you. David.
Yes, I wanted to add on with talking about helping you out with the neighbors walk around your home. One of the things that Glendale didn't mention it, but your local fire station is a great resource. They're your neighborhood firefighters, and they can come out. And it's usually, you can call the business number or their local dispatch number, non-emergency, and they'll be happy to come out. I don't want to speak on behalf of Glendale, but I know from my experience, they'll be happy to come out, talk to the neighbors, walk around their home with them. And that usually is two things. One, it helps them determine some areas they could strengthen, but also it helps them get to know the firefighters better. So if there is an emergency, they have somebody they recognize, somebody that can help them out. So there's a couple things that really help out your local firefighters. Thank you.
Great. John.
Yeah, and also Glendale Cert conducts home ignition zone evaluations. So if that's something you're interested in, especially that 0 to 5 feet and beyond, you can call for a free assessment. And we have several volunteers who come to your location in Glendale to assess your home for free.
That's great. And I think some of the local fire safety councils in some areas will do the same thing. That's my understanding. Did anyone want to add on about the 3 things that people can do immediately? I think I got us a little off track with some of the other questions.
I think Chief McLean hit the nail on the head with the 3, and just to kind of reinforce those, the home hardening, or what we're referring to as home hardening, it's somewhat of a kind of a loose term. We're really talking about retrofitting existing homes that may not meet the current Chapter 7A building code, which is a fancy way to say more fire resilient home. Those laws went into effect in 2007, and homes built after that are built to a different standard of more wildfire resilience than they were previously. So if you are in a home that was built prior to 2007, it's really important for you to visit our website, fire.ca.gov/dspace, and look for our low-cost retrofit list link. And if there's time, I'm going to show a few things here, and that's one of the things that I'll show you. But on that are those things that you can do at little to no cost to really give your home a fighting chance against an oncoming wildfire. And I have some slides that I'm going to show later as well that will really illustrate the point of why, especially you folks that have those earlier built homes, need to focus in that area.
Do you want to show those now? Would that be a good time to do it?
Certainly. Give me 1 minute to move things around, and I will.
If that works for you. If you want, I can ask another question while you get that queued up.
I will have it in a couple of seconds here.
Sure. Oh, there it goes.
Okay. So I'm going to run through these in the essence of time a little quickly, but I will emphasize the points that need to be made. There's about 10 slides, but we'll kind of charge through these. Oh, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about that community hardening approach. If you look at the three center rings, if we start on the outside, the darker ring, that's kind of that more urban or wildland area, the forested areas. And as we work in, that's that wildland urban interface area. And then as we get closer in, that's really our communities that we live in, those pockets that may be near the wildland. And this is the kind of approach that we look at when we're looking to do various projects across the state, and really focusing on that community hardening and then buffering as you move your way out. As Assemblymember Friedman mentioned, if you look on the left, our top 20 largest California wildfires, almost all but 2 have occurred since the year 2003. That's significant. For a long time, we had from all years, all decades, almost in this circle. But since 2003, it has really dominated the scale here. And the most destructive wildfires, and destructive is by the number of residential structures that were destroyed. And you can see, again, the same trend from 2003 all the way to 2020. And if you look at this, the largest fires, more than half of the largest wildfires have occurred since 2020. Just staggering numbers. So the next slide I'm going to show, this really illustrates why 0 to 5. So when we talk about Ember Resistance, because this facility, it's the Institute for Insurance and Business and Home Safety in North Carolina. They have the only facility in the world that can replicate ember production, and by putting fans behind it and blowing those embers at a structure. They've done significant research to determine that 0 to 5 foot zone is the most critical zone when it relates to embers. And you can see the accumulation of those embers at the bottom of the home. Now just imagine if you had wood mulch or other organic material right up next to your home. Those embers that are pelting your house from the wind that we experience in Southern California due to Santa Ana conditions, that's what your home needs to be able to take and not burn down. Another illustration here, and Assemblymember Friedman mentioned one of her bills that passed, AB 3074, which established the 0 to 5 foot zone or ember resistant zone, which we aptly dubbed Zone 0, is working through the process. We hope to have the regulation once the board finalizes the regulation sometime in early 2023, and it will be established for all new construction first, and then all existing construction the following year in the beginning of 2024. So we still have some time for all of you that have those things right up next to your home, as this illustration shows. This is a common residential structure with a wood fence all the way attached to the home, organic material right up next to and under the window. They ignited this material using ember producers down here. below the fence. That fire worked its way toward this house that had the impeccable 5 feet zone next to it. 0 to 5 feet clearance, non-wood attached to the home, and rock next to the house. As you can see, the result in 12 minutes was this home was destroyed and this home stood. There was a 12-mile-per-hour wind. That's it. Not even a significant Santa Ana wind condition. So it just further reinforces the importance of this 0 to 5 foot zone. So what do we do to help with that? Well, we've created various reference materials and guidance documents, and our website has a lot of material that can guide you and help you, assist you in where to start. This is one of the resources that came from a wildfire prevention grant that CAL FIRE sponsored with all of these partners that created this guide. It's a step-by-step guide that walks you through with pictures just like this that illustrate the areas of concern and what you need to do to fix those areas. There's significant ongoing research about structure separation distances. A lot of us have structures like this, sheds that are in close proximity to our home that we store materials in, whether that's our lawnmower or gas or paint or whatever those garden materials are. Some of them are right up next to our homes because our lot sizes are a little bit smaller. Well, as you can see, how much heat and energy is produced when one of those catch on fire, because these are not built to fire resistive Chapter 7A building standards. These are built with the most flammable building materials possible, not intentionally, just they are built that way. They will catch fire due to embers, and if they're in close enough proximity to your home, regardless of how well hardened your home is, if it's within 10 feet of your home and you have a complete wood structure like this one, your house most likely will burn down. So we're doing sponsoring a structure separation experiment with the National Institute for Standards and Technology, as well as IBHS I mentioned earlier, to determine exactly what that structure separation distance needs to be for a home to withstand that burning down. Another document that is really that's really important that just came out, Headwaters and IBHS, Headwaters Economics, in July of 2020, just released a new document that compares the costs for building to Chapter 7A at the baseline minimum qualification or requirements all the way to the top, most stringent Chapter 7A, and a nominal cost of additional $27,000 to build the house when you're building your home. I know it sounds like a lot, but the added protection was over 50% greater than if you built to the minimum Chapter 7A. So this document's available on Headwater Economics website, and I encourage you to take a read through it. It has a lot of good information as well. We do have wildfire prevention grants that are available. So through those organizations that I mentioned earlier, they can apply for wildfire prevention grants. That's why I encourage you to participate in those groups. We do offer grants to the local response area, which include Glendale and others, that we can provide financial assistance to those organizations to do brush clearing, to do chipping, to do planning, to do a community wildfire preparedness plan, to do public education events in your local jurisdiction. So, and we have money to do that through the next fiscal years, through appropriations from the legislature. Thank you, Assemblymember Friedman, for helping get these funds to us to be able to get these dollars out to all of you. So those were the slides that I had. And if we have a minute, I can run through a couple of the websites, or if we want to turn back to some questions.
Yeah, that was really, really great information. Thank you. I do want to ask the Glendale Fire Department if they have any particular Glendale related information about elderly and disabled people who might be living in our neighborhoods. Any particular resources to help anybody who maybe can't afford to do any of this work? John.
Yeah, absolutely. We have here in Glendale a very committed and dedicated staff with our neighborhood services who reaches out to those who are elderly and infirm and offers assistance when needed. In conjunction with the Office of Emergency Management and the fire department, we can oftentimes partner neighboring services, whether it be with HOAs or through our own grassroots efforts on hazard mitigation to help some folks in the neighborhood. And it's a challenge. If you are elderly and you have a home that needs quite a bit of maintenance, it can be a real challenge and real daunting. But what I try to do when I visit folks like that is focus on that zero zone. And it doesn't take much. And though they may not be able to do it, oftentimes with the help of neighbors, as Cheryl had mentioned, whether it is mapping your neighborhood and getting to know the resources of your neighbors and making good neighbors through HOAs and community emergency response teams, oftentimes volunteers can assist. But for those folks in Glendale, if you have issues and you need help getting in contact with those resources.
Yep, I think we lost him.
Reach out to the fire department. Oh,
Thanks.
sorry about that. Lost you there?
That's okay. That's the we all know it at this point. We all know that Zoom pause.
All right. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Speaking of local government, as opposed to maybe CAL FIRE, although CAL FIRE does have some areas that they are responsible for, we have gotten a lot of questions, and we always get questions about what happens if you're doing a great job as best you can with your property, but you got the guy next door who's got all the dead trees and the overgrown bushes, and you just can't seem to get them to take this seriously, and you feel unsafe. What can homeowners do about problems on their block?
I'll take that one for us. So we will go out and do an inspection. So if we get some concerns from neighbors who are doing a great job and they are looking over at their fence and they see their neighbors not doing such a great job, we will go out there and help them out. So we have a couple ways you can do that. You can call our Fire Prevention Bureau, 818-548-4810. You can send us an email through our fpbinfo@glendaleca.gov. I'll put all this information in the chat, as well as we have a dedicated website that we use for our vegetation management, where you can go into that website and lodge an anonymous complaint if you feel uncomfortable giving your name, and we'll send out an inspector who will go out there and take a look at that the neighbor's vegetation and make sure we get them set straight.
And I know it's not a fair question, but do you know if Burbank and LA have similar kinds of inspection programs?
Yes, I'm not exactly familiar with their exact processes, but yes. So I know LA are all of our neighboring jurisdictions, Pasadena, Burbank, LA County, they'll have their own programs that they do with inspections as well.
And I'm assuming if it's public land, that you can do the same thing. If you feel that public land that's adjacent to your property or close to your property is posing a hazard, you can alert the agency.
Absolutely, we take those. Absolutely, we take those calls as well. If you're living next to open space or city-owned property, we will do the same thing with that. And if I can just add, we have a pretty good program where we do an inspection on all of our city-owned property that's within 100 feet of a structure, and we make sure we do our own brush clearance in the city, just like we're requiring the homeowners to do. We're not just passing the buck. We take a hard look at our own property and make sure we're doing our own brush clearance within the city as well.
And I want to add, we don't have anyone here from an organization like the Theodore Payne Foundation, which is a native plant foundation, but there are definitely plants that are more flammable than others. And so, especially some of our non-native plants that are pretty common in the area, like palm trees and eucalyptus, can be very, very flammable. And then there's a lot of native plants that are more fire resistant. So I'm sure that I know that there's resources. I know Theodore Payne and others can help educate you as to which plants, even drought resistant plants, will help be better than others that can go up like torches in fires, correct? Anyone want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would like to, we, for the longest time, even CAL FIRE, we had on our website, fire resistant landscaping. And that was the kind of the mantra that we all subscribe to. And through a lot of research, a lot of time, and a lot of burning of structures, unfortunately, throughout the state, what we've learned is that all organic material in the form of plants, shrubs, bushes, trees will burn under the right conditions. So we have to be very strategic and very careful with the placement of those things near our home. So we've gone to the terminology now of fire smart landscaping and being more strategic and smart about those locations. So yes, there are ones that burn that don't have as much woody material, that have a lot more water in them than others that are less susceptible. But just want everyone to know that all plants will burn under the right conditions.
So don't try as best you can not to have them in those 5 feet particularly, correct?
Correct, absolutely.
Great. You know, let me switch gears and ask this. There's a lot of concern from people as we find out more about the harmful effects of breathing the smoke from wildfires. And sometimes you don't have a choice, right? There's a fire near you and the smoke can just set into the community. What can we do to protect ourselves, and who's most at risk when there's wildfire smoke in the area?
Well, I'll start with this one. I think that the answer is we all are. Everybody breathing the particulate matter that comes from wildland fires is not good. And because it's not just the grass that's burning, it's not just the trees that are burning, it's all of those hydrocarbon-based materials like furniture, homes, paint, roofing material, all of those really bad things that we don't want to breathe. That's what you're breathing as well. So it's imperative that if you're in this area that is susceptible to wildfire, which we all live in, is to get a home air purifier and to have that in your house. You don't have to run it all the time. I mean, you can, but it's most importantly to run it when there's a fire in the area. There's a lot more particulate matter in the area. There are really good, inexpensive machines out there that will help you. Also, as we've learned over the last 2.5 years, wearing a mask, it can and will help filter out some of that particulate matter to help you breathe better. And then ultimately, if you have a condition that is more susceptible and you have the ability to go to a friend's house, go to a family member's house that is out of the fire area, if you're able, and get out of the smoke for a while. Those are your best options. But yes, we are all susceptible.
Thank you. I'd like to I know that Cal OES also had some slides they wanted to show us. So before I move on to ask Armine some questions, we get a lot about insurance, something that people think a lot about. I wanted to give Cal OES a chance to give us their presentation.
So in terms of,
oh no, let's go to Cal OES first. So Cheryl, do you want to? I think you had a few slides you wanted to show.
Yeah, it's really quick.
Sure. Visual aids are great.
If I can figure it out.
There you go.
Okay. I just wanted to break down what Cal OES does. Cal OES is basically a support to, is it on presentation or is it just? Okay. Cal OES is basically a support system to the local governments. We are a conduit between the locals and the feds. Even though we have regional territory reps like myself and Dave that work directly with the local jurisdictions, we are actually like the third tier. California is broken up into 6 mutual, sorry, I'm having real issues. 6 mutual aid regions. And Southern California is covered by regions 1 and 6. Like Dave mentioned, he covers region 1 and region 6 is the backside of the state. So with that, we have sliced it all up into different regions. We're the southern region. So disasters are local. So they start at the local level with the field IC. As you'll see, we're like the third tier up. Before the state. That's where the region becomes involved. So most of the time when there's a disaster and it's beyond the capabilities of the local, they'll come to the region first. And that's how we operate. So we're mainly a support system. We mainly connect resources with the local governments that need them. We're more like a kind of like a matchmaker. That's pretty much the end of my report, unless there's some questions.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. I like the matchmaker term. I've certainly seen from the other side, I've seen you all in action during some of these fires from the state side. So I know how important that coordination is. And I get your blast when there's emergencies. So I know how much that coordination, how important that is when you've got many jurisdictions that are involved. And it really helps to have an umbrella group that's out there, making sure that everyone is on the same page and has that coordination. So thank you. Now, I do want to, oh, sorry, yes, go ahead.
Can I add one thing with Cheryl?
Yeah.
There's a question that was on there about aircraft. And I answered that one. City of Glendale Fire Department doesn't currently have aircraft. Most aircraft in the state of California, and Cal Fire can back me on this, is supported by the state or federal government. There is in LA County and LA City, they have aircraft that they have agreements with the city of Glendale where they'll share their aircraft. So if you do get a fire start in the city of Glendale or the surrounding neighborhoods, LA County Fire, LA City Fire will send their aircraft to assist with that. They also have a new program that started last year. It's called the Quick Response Force, and it's QRF. It was a partnership between Edison, LA County Fire, Ventura County Fire, and Orange County Fire, where Edison is actually giving grant funding to support 2 Chinook aircraft and a Sikorsky aircraft. The Chinooks are 3,000 gallon retardant or foam dropping aircraft. The Sikorsky is 1,000 gallon. Those 3 aircraft are hangared in those 3 jurisdictions. And if they are needed for initial response, they can actually respond. And they also fly at night, where that's one of the questions a lot of people have about aircraft flying at night. I know a lot of times on the forest, they shut down at night because and it's expected because of the canyons and things you can't see very well. But the quick reaction force, they actually do fly at night. We had a fire on the 5 freeway, the route fire this past month, and it ran 1,000 acres in one day and hit about 5,000 acres by nightfall. They brought in those 3 aircraft. They worked all night and they put about I think it was like 300,000 gallons of retardant on the side of that fire. And they basically put the fire out overnight. And so the rest of the 3 days we were there, it was all mop up. So it's a great resource. It is available to the city of Glendale. They're usually, the state of California is going to be involved with as far as the reimbursement piece of that. But we worry about those things later. Our job is to get the resources to the people that need the resources. And like Cheryl said, one of the things we do is we're a broker, or like she said, we help out with resources throughout the state, whether it's federal or state resources. We also have the ability to mission task the California National Guard aircraft, and they have aircraft available for water dropping and foam capabilities. So we do have that available. So I just wanted to answer that one question I saw in the chat room. Thank you very much.
No, that's great. I really appreciate the answer. And I think it's good for people to see that issues like having the right aircraft are something that agencies do work on constantly. And that sharing of resources is also very important. And we share not only those resources, but firefighter resources, with firefighters moving as they need to across the state. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but this year and the last few years, the state has put a tremendous amount of financial resources into both wildfire reduction risk and into firefighter capabilities. Both trying to scale up the number of firefighters we have available in the state and certainly make sure that we get those firefighters the equipment that they need to fight fires. So this is something that has been as the fires have ramped up, as certainly the funding also has ramped up. Obviously, once you have a fire, the cost, the human cost and the property cost, they're really just tremendous, to the point where, there's almost not going to be enough money, given this trend that's continuing to really deal with the amount of risk that we have across the state. And it's a real challenge. And with that, I'd like to move to Armine, because this is, really front and center of what she deals with. And the first question I want to ask you is, beyond the home hardening that we've heard from the other experts on the panel, on the insurance side, on the paperwork side, what should people be doing more that they're not doing in terms of being ready in case they would unfortunately have that worst case scenario of having to file a claim?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we always suggest that you as a policyholder need to obtain a copy of your residential homeowners policy ahead of time to make sure that you also have conversations with your insurance representative about what coverage you have when it comes to rebuilding or repairing your home after a disaster, what will cost for you to replace your personal belongings and living expenses. But Assembly Member, if I may take a moment to
Sure.
share a framework that the Department of Insurance and a number of state agencies have been working on in the last 3 years. I believe this will be of particular interest to your constituents. And I hope you can see this now. So this framework that the department has been working on is called Safer from Wildfires in 1, 2, 3. It was launched earlier this year with all the agencies that you see on your screen. And essentially, this framework, it aims to not only reduce your wildfire risk, but also make insurance costs transparent, that wildfire risk that an insurance company assigns to your property. Many of you might not know that every insurance company assigns you a wildfire risk score. And so far, you haven't been aware of that wildfire risk score. But once these regulations go into effect, and we hope very soon in the next few months, you should be able to receive a wildfire risk score from your insurance agency, what went into that risk score, and you will have the ability to also appeal that wildfire risk score should you do the work to harden your home. These regulations also come along with some discounts that your insurance companies will be mandated to give you, anywhere from 5 to 20%, really depending on how you pay for your insurance. But essentially, the framework gives you action steps on what you can do to harden your home and in effect, receive those discounts. So I'll just share with you 3 slides what the framework really is, and it gives you essentially actionable steps, 1, 2, 3 steps on what you can do to harden your home and your community. And I know that it might be a little difficult to read the slides, but the whole framework is available on our website, insurance.ca.gov. So please do make sure that you check it out afterwards. So essentially, it starts with protecting your individual structure, making sure that your walls, your vents, your roof, your windows are all fire safe. So it gives you essentially these action items. Secondly, it is protecting your immediate structure. So clearing vegetation, debris from under the decks, removing any combustible sheds. And lastly, the most crucial point really is working together as a community, coming up with a plan, how to protect your community as a whole, how to clear vegetation in your community, how to have an evacuation plan should there be a need. And this does involve your local fire department, your local jurisdictions. And we always say nothing's worse than if, let's say, you've done the work to harden your home, but your next door neighbor's home is a fire hazard. So not only does that make insurance potentially unavailable in your area, but also during the wildfire emergency, you will, of course, suffer some sort of a loss. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But as I mentioned earlier, the Department of Insurance really is here to serve you. So anytime you need assistance, or if you simply have a question, again, don't hesitate to call that hotline number that I gave earlier, the 1-800-927-4357.
Thank you. Non-renewals of insurance have become very, very common in our neighborhoods, particularly in our hillside neighborhoods, and it's a huge concern for homeowners. What rights do homeowners have, and how do they protect against a non-renewal?
Right. So for those of you that don't know, insurance companies can non-renew for almost any reason that is risk related. But the Department of Insurance, especially in the last 3 years, has been tackling this issue. And so, in fact, a bill that Commissioner Lara had authored while he was still in the state Senate went into effect that now provides a 1-year moratorium from non-renewals for areas surrounding a governor-declared wildfire emergency. So you now are protected for at least a year. You know that you are going to have insurance immediately following the wildfire emergency. Also, we've been able to, working with the state legislature, we've been able to increase the non-renewal notice an insurance company gives you from 45 days to 75 days. So allowing the homeowner an additional month to find an alternative policy. And of course, the Safer from Wildfires framework that I just mentioned is in place to essentially reduce the wildfire risk and decrease non-renewals. And we know that what we're doing as a department is working. The data that we have from 2020, which is the latest data on non-renewals, shows that non-renewals are down 10%. So we're sure that the 2021 data, once it comes out, we're sure that the non-renewals will have decreased as well. So it definitely is an issue, but we as a department are working to tackle this issue.
Thank you. We've gotten a lot of questions in the chat related to evacuations in dense areas and areas where they have older infrastructure, older windy roads. People from the Hollywood Hills, for instance, where there's a lot of tourists who maybe from out of the area are worried about, given the amount of congestion and that sometimes happens in those areas. And I know that none of you are LA City Fire, but just in general, do those of you from Glendale and CAL FIRE as well, do you work with local agencies? Do you have evacuation plans for areas that are particularly at risk? And what can homeowners who live in those areas do to make sure that they know how to evacuate and that there's some kind of contingency in case they get a call in the middle of the night or something just all of a sudden happens and they're unsure what to do next? Anyone want to take that?
I'll jump on that one to start with. And just like all of our neighboring agencies, we all do have evacuation plans for the majority of our high risk areas. And of course, the goal is to do that for any of our interface and intermix zones, which are the areas that are most threatened due to wildfire. In that, and John, I don't know if you want to add on to some of this. There are exercises that have been planned. Some of your questions relative to the Hollywood Hills, which are not areas that are unlike other areas of the county as well, where you've got narrow access and egress roads. You might have brush that's well overgrown into roadways. Those will probably always be our biggest threat, and probably what we're looking at probably to help us the most is a solid relationship with law enforcement to assist in evacuation efforts. By trying to pre-identify access and egress routes, we try to maintain some of those vital access corridors so we can get fire resources into the scene. But there are areas where we won't be able to do that, where it'll be the same access and egress road that both firefighters will have to occupy and members of the community. I guess our biggest goal is, as we get to the periods of the year, which I think we've all recognized here over the years have become our really high hazard times, that's when we really ask the public to assist us with trying to maintain those open roadways. And I understand in a lot of those neighborhoods, parking is at a premium. And so we end up with narrowing some of those access routes, which makes it really tough to get a 10 or 11 foot wide fire engine or other apparatus through. But that would be one of the biggest ways that we can ensure that our folks have the fastest response to a fire and can actually start to fight the risk by being able to get there. Chief Bigelow, any thoughts from the state side?
Yeah, and our areas differ a little in that the areas we protect typically are a little more rural than the urban areas, but the same issues apply with narrow roadways, limited ingress and egress. And what I always encourage people to do, just the only point that I'll really add on to yours, Chief, you hit it all, is having more than one way out of your home and really trying to figure out where the problem is, so that when you leave out of your driveway and you have the choice between going left or going right, make sure you know which way the emergency is, because that's not the way you want to head. So it's important to know, where you're going and how to get there and try to avoid, but also leave early. Like if you feel like you're in danger, or those hairs stand up on the back of your neck, or you get that nervous feeling where you're calling a neighbor or a friend or somebody because you're worried, it's time. That's the time you should probably just start getting your stuff together and leave, because the reverse 911 that we talked about, those are fantastic resources. Please sign up for those in your local area, whatever the name of it is in your local area. That's really important to get that early awareness. But sometimes we don't get that awareness that early. So just leave early and know two ways out of your home.
Right. Much easier to leave and then just come back than to wait too long, I'm sure. and to get stuck in that crowd trying to get out of an area. If you haven't signed up for a reverse 911 service, how do you get information in the middle of the night? What's the best way to find out what's happening right near you? Is it the radio? Would you go on where would you even look to find out?
I'll tell you, even working for CAL FIRE, living in a rural area, having access to all the fancy things that I have access to, but what I really find useful are groups on Facebook or other social media platforms that they have people that monitor the radios constantly. That's all they do is monitor the radio, and they chat and they post every single comment that are made about what's happening in that incident. You're getting instant feedback, instant situational awareness as to where that incident is, what's going on with it, the direction it's heading, and all of that. So honestly, the first thing I do is I open Facebook, go to Mountain Fire and Emergency, and see what's on there to see what's happening. And because I know that they're listening, and I'm getting the most. If I don't have access to my radio or something else to where I can really tune in, that's great. That's just another resource. It's not the resource. It's not the only resource, but it's a resource.
Right. So I know that all of our cities have their own fire departments, have Twitter feeds,
Yeah.
and do post about fires as they're happening, as does a lot of the local media.
Mhm.
So there's good places there to look as well. And certainly just looking outside and seeing the conditions. And like you said, if you smell smoke, if you're seeing the light in the sky and you feel that you're in an area that's hard to evacuate, maybe it's time to just go and make sure you're safe before you do anything else. So this has been a really amazing panel, and we've had a lot of questions, and we will do our best to get everybody answers to their questions if we can. I wanted to see if anyone has any last comments before we go for the night. I think Mr. Chief Stone, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Just real quick, ask about evacuations, things like that. There are some really good iPhone or Android apps available that you can download. There's one called Watch Duty, which is they actually give you information if there's a new fire start. You can set it up to put geo fences around an area, say that there's a fire starting within your county or city. It'll actually give you that information, and it gives updates also. And it's the same thing as Chief Bigelow was saying, that when people are posting things, it actually picks that up and it'll post it so you can get updates and notifications. And then there's I'm sure you've heard of Pulse Point, which was designed as a CPR application by the Annenberg Foundation. But that one you can actually download for free. It's open to anybody. That one you can actually follow your local fire department. So Glendale's on that Pulse Point, so you can actually go onto that. LA City, LA County, CAL FIRE does have, but you can go on there and you can follow the local fire departments, and it'll give you notifications if there's a fire start in your area, a medical emergency, or if you have learned to do CPR or want to learn to do CPR, you can do that through your local either fire department, or sometimes your local community center will teach CPR. And then that Pulse Point will actually notify you if you give them your location. They'll notify if there's somebody in your area that needs CPR, and if you're close enough, you can go and render aid. So a lot of times those apps have a really good purpose. So I would say a couple of those apps are really good to download that can give you notifications, and you can adjust them to what your likes or dislikes are. But thank you very much for that.
That's great. I just wrote them down. I've never heard of either, I have to say, and I'm going to download them myself. Are we still offering free Cert training to residents for emergency training?
I know LA City, LA County does, and I think Glendale does also.
For those of you who do, you want to explain that really quickly for those at home who don't know what that is?
I can do that really quick. I used to coordinate that, but Cert is just a civilian emergency response team, and it's training for your local civilians. It's a 21-hour training course. It's offered usually through your local fire department or through emergency management office, like where you're at in Glendale. That's operational area C as in Charlie, and they have a very robust emergency management program there. And so you can take the course. Generally, they offer it on the weekends. Usually it's 3 7-hour sessions. Sometimes they do it where it's a couple hours a night for 7 weeks or 3 weeks. And the idea being is basic first aid. And like you mentioned earlier, neighbor helping neighbor. You learn basics on utility services, like shutting your gas off if it's necessary, your utility services, basic first aid. If there's a collapsed building, some basic safety about that. And then the idea being is that we know that the fire department, law enforcement is going to be inundated if there's a big earthquake or wildland fire. And so this teaches the citizens in the area how to take care of themselves in the first 72 hours of an emergency, knowing that it's likely the fire department won't be able to get there because they're going to prioritize the most severe building collapse or most severe need for life hazard. And so it's a really good program. You can go, I think it's still available. You can go on your website, you can type in cert.gov, and you should be able to lead you to that. And you probably, and I think the representative from Glendale had mentioned something about CERT volunteers for Glendale. So I'll kind of pass it to him to probably have more specifics for Glendale. But thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. Yeah, CERT in Glendale is alive and well. We're actually gearing up to offer another class. Go to cert.glendaleca.gov. We do a hybrid model out in Glendale, which is a self-paced online version of the lecture. And then we follow it up with 2 days, 8 hours each of hands-on training. The really cool thing about CERT, and Chief Stone mentioned this, is it puts you in touch with your neighbors. In fact, in Glendale, what we like to do is localize CERT at the HOA level, empower those HOAs to know their community. We are incorporating the Map Your Neighborhood program, where folks get to reach out to their neighbors, get to know one another. And in the time of emergency, as Chief Stone so eloquently mentioned, it's neighbor helping neighbor. And that's where CERT is a force multiplier for first responders. So you can imagine you prepare your home for an emergency or for a fire, you prepare a plan for your family, and then you prepare yourself to react, and you're going to be pretty well off. So if you need help with CERT, I encourage you to visit cert.glendaleca.gov, and we'll get you in that next class.
I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. If we had people every couple blocks who did the CERT training and organized themselves as block captains for major emergencies, we would be a much safer and more resilient Southern California, that's for sure. We know we're disaster prone. If it's not wildfires, it's earthquakes, it's, anything can happen. So, I would encourage as many people as possible, if you're so inclined to take advantage of those free classes. The life you save might be a neighbor, it could be someone in your own family. So thank you for giving us those tools. Tonight has been amazing in terms of the amount of information, the amount of resources that you've given us. I know that there's a lot of that information in the chat. So those of you who are watching this Zoom can look at it in the chat. And when we post this on social media, we'll be sure to include those resources on Facebook so that people can see them there as well. Does anyone have any last tips or statements they want to give before we say goodnight to the folks at home? Well, again, I just want to thank all of you for spending your time here tonight. I want to thank all of you for what you do, keeping us safe every single day. We really appreciate you, and certainly appreciate tonight. So thanks, and thanks to everybody who watched. I hope that this was valuable, and we'll see you again soon. Take care and be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly members. Great. Appreciate the panel.
Thank you all.
Have a good night.